All right, guys, welcome to another live stream. If you show up, let me know if you can hear me. But luckily, we haven't been having too many issues with that. I decided to trick you guys and do it a little early this time, 2 minutes for balance. You got to do everything. Everything in life is revolves around balance. So since I totally flake out half the time, the other half the time I should be 2 minutes early, right? All right. Looks like we got a couple people dropping in. I don't have an insane amount of specific topics to go over, but what's new. But there are a few things I wanted to go over that I had mentioned in the title. Appreciate it. Since 5x5, um, the a few ways in which the USA economically, culturally, everything is past the point of no return, and then a few things that I think that most you guys should have squared away, but some specifics that I think are going to be much harder to get and much more important to get specifically as we go forward. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and then whatever you guys want to talk about. And also because YouTube is so goofy, they've even further tightened restrictions on firearm videos. Nothing too dramatically different than what was up there for most people yet, but any of them are dumb. Any of the restrictions are dumb. So I do plan on trying to go more onto Rumble, at least always both onto Rumble. I just still haven't practiced with the Rumble broadcast because like JJ uses it can simulcast. I'm going to start using that. I just need to make sure I have it figured out. And then also want to kind of dust off the Patreon, which there's only been a couple people on there because I've been really slacking and haven't actually done anything with it. So I will definitely going to reward those people. I have a bunch of stuff that I'm going to be giving away. Table, and I'll start with the people who have already been on there and were just thanklessly supporting me with it, even though I haven't done anything with that. But I plan on probably doing a lot more like exclusive stuff there, and not necessarily like a lot, but stuff that's just probably more commentary. But I'll probably do some polls, find out what people want. But one of the main ones that I was talking about, we got 20 people, not too bad for the first couple minutes in. But the main thing that I've noticed, and logistically for our country, one of the ways, because I always talk about the economics, and we all know how disastrous situation the country's in economically, and that we're pretty much past the point of no return in a realistic sense, and we're almost past it in a literal sense. Like if you even according to the normie, I posted, I think it was last year, the articles from major financial news networks and sources about how, what's up, Veritas Files, appreciate it, about how the U.S. There's official deadlines for when you've reached the event horizon in terms of the national debt and things like that. But the problems are like you actually have a point of no return long before you have the literal point of no return, realistically, because people are not just going to wait until the actual point of no return to make decisions based on that. When it's obvious that the course is not going to be changed in time, even if it technically, theoretically could be, a lot of these problems are going to start manifest, or at least a large percentage of the population is going to start taking actions as if it's going to manifest, which we know it will anyway, and that'll just hasten it. And up until that point, that's assuming the current trajectory. Things are likely going to get worse, especially with all the international conflict, people moving away from the petrodollar system, etc. So South Florida DCL, fitness, skills, courage, and gear, always important. But the main thing that I was going to talk about tonight, another way in which we're past the point of no return, is the massive amount of immigration and the uncontrolled nature of it. And it's just totally wild to me. I've literally seen people within the past 48 hours. Yeah, and I don't tend to give any notice, sorry, morning light, other than the fact that when I do go live, it's almost always Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific. So it's a good time to check if you're interested in checking these out. I'll try to come up with somewhere I can post a schedule and then plan it better. But in the meantime, so I can get guys like Dan and Shay back on, give them some notice. Because lately I've been bad about keeping track of even what day it is and when I'm scheduling all my other side hustles and doing stuff. So it kind of creeps up on me. But anyway, so the immigration specifically is becoming a massive problem in a lot of these other countries. And I've seen people within the last 48 hours, otherwise intelligent people, talk about how supposedly immigration is just always a net benefit, which is utterly absurd just on its face. It doesn't take much to disprove that, simply because just in a physical world like ours, nothing is just always a benefit. Like the saying goes, the dose makes the poison. So even like there's nothing that any amount of it in any situation is good or beneficial. And especially when you have a complex system that's always going to have strange emergent properties, then you really need to be careful with what you're doing. And honestly, it's more close to being the opposite. And the US, because people always bring up the fact that the US had significant immigration before, and people were flooding in during certain times, and then the country continued to have economic prosperity or even maybe increase during that time. But it still could be that that was this in spite of that and not because of it. But also, it's a lot of that's related to the fact that you didn't have real social programs back then in the way you did now. So there's no chance of someone coming in and being a net drain. It just wasn't possible. You could come in and be homeless maybe, but you're not going to come in and get free phones, free housing, free, you know what I mean? Like it's just, there's almost no way you could come in and be a drain. And people were coming over specifically to work and specifically to try to get jobs and create things and assimilate into the current society and things like that. And not just coming over to hopefully get handouts, which you don't have to think that these people are doing anything wrong from their own perspective. Like if for it to recognize that something is a net negative for the host country, like I sympathize completely with people who are in third world countries and think that they could improve their lives by doing anything, and I'm not even saying that I would necessarily do anything different, but that doesn't mean that it's a benefit for the US and for our country and our families, et cetera. Resource allocation is always a zero sum game. And that's one of the things that I've mentioned before is that one of the key things I've noted, a fundamental difference, because I don't believe in this like the two party thing, like left, right. That doesn't make sense. There's way more different types of political opinions. But generally, how I kind of differentiate between a generally like liberal viewpoint and a generally conservative viewpoint, or how I would differentiate it, is this fundamental belief in whether the natural state is abundance and the government and businesses and people are keeping you from that, or if the natural state of the world for humans is scarcity, limited resources, and that you have to work to defeat that. And in my mind, that latter is the case. Pretty obviously, the natural state of a human's existence is naked in the woods. And that's not what it's been for us for thousands of years because we've worked hard to overcome that, but only specifically because we've worked against that. Like if you start, giving away all the work that you've done to get out of that situation, you could end right back up there pretty quick. And there's an infinite amount of need that can exist. And there's not an infinite amount of resources that can be allocated to that. So this from each according to his ability to each according to his need thing is always going to fail because especially when the need is not really always need, but sometimes just want. And there's no way to differentiate that. Like how many of these people that are on social programs really need it in a literal sense? And there's all sorts of logistical and realistic caps to the from each according to his ability. What if the ability of everyone just isn't there? The need is still going to be there. The need would actually increase. So you can't just give out stuff based on need. You have to give it out based on what's available to give, and that's not what's being done. So this idea that like it's always good is just completely farcical. It goes in the face of like literally any kind of scientific observation of the situation. And it's crazy to me that you have people now who can simultaneously like start asking these people, and you will see that there are people who simultaneously believe, like, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but there's something working its way around the Twitter sphere where the people were getting all bent out of shape because women were saying that if you're walking through the woods, they'd rather come across a bear than a man. Just because it's men are so deep, like a bear's not going to rape me. They're just animal. They just live there. The men are evil, whatever. Like whatever you want to read into it. I don't know. People have their different reasons for it, but the idea being that they'd rather come across a bear than a man. And of course, the men are all like looking at it from a more autistic perspective of like, well, statistically, a bear is more likely. Blah, blah, blah. So they're not really understanding either. But the point is, you have people out there who simultaneously would rather come across a bear than a random man, just a man, period. But they think that we should have open borders and have uncontrolled amounts of military-aged men flooding into the country. And those are not, to them, those aren't conflicting ideas. And then some of these people simultaneously believe that gentrification is somehow bad. So white people moving into a neighborhood, fixing up a house and making the other houses more expensive or worth more is a bad thing. But any other type of immigration into the country is somehow good. And one of the problems that I see with even so-called conservatives on dealing with this issue is that they look at it from a purely economic perspective, or they try to compartmentalize it because they don't want to be thought of as racist or something like that. And they'll say, well, as long as it's legal, then it's okay. And it's like, well, then that's an easy fix. You just make it all legal, make amnesty like they want, and then boom, it's all legal. Then the problem should be solved, right? No, the problem is that, first of all, like I said, treating every instance of immigration as being equal doesn't make any sense. Treating every instance of anything as equal doesn't make any sense. And the key is transformation and change. You don't even have to look at it as a positive or negative. But I mean, you could have the most orderly group of, you could have, like, let's say you had 1 million Japanese doctors and engineers move into a small town. Most people would say that economically that's going to be a boon. These are all skilled laborers. They have extremely low crime. You know, they're going to generally be polite or whatever, but it's still going to massively transform that area. You know, if you have 100,000 Americans there somewhere in some small town in the Midwest or something, let's say, and then now you have a million, 1.1 million, and 1 million of them are Japanese, that village is going to look a lot different in the next 100 years now than it would have. And whether that's a good or bad thing just depends on which of those types of cultural states of being you prefer. And that's not to say that either one is necessarily good or bad. You know, some people would love living in Japan, some people would hate it, and vice versa. And but it's absolutely going to create change. So and people not recognizing that as part of it. So first of all, it's just absurd to think that a ton of people flooding in who are unchecked, getting on social programs, completely no checks being done for disease, for criminal status, for purposeful infiltration, for any sort of skills or IQ or anything like that. Just, yeah, it is nonsense. So that's just one of the, but we're past the point of no return on that, like I said, because if you look at the jobs data, they tout the jobs data as being this improvement, but almost all the benefit is going to foreign-born people and its low-level jobs. And if you look at just like American-born people, then employment's getting worse, and wages are certainly going down in real terms as well. So it's creating a disaster there. But now the numbers are so much that in a lot of these municipalities and states and things like that, actual American, like, you know, legacy Americans, whatever you call it, are outnumbered. So regardless of what you, like I said, what you think about it, we're past the point of no return on a lot of that way. And that's one of the reasons I think it'll come down to like a state versus federal situation. And some states might turn against certain parts within their own state, the big cities that are completely different ideologically and politically than the entire rest of the state. We're already seeing almost half of Oregon trying to break away and join with Idaho and things like that. So it's a wild situation. Hello from sunny California to Mark. Donna, glad you finally made the chat. What are the 4 things? I'm going to get into that. So because we have all these ways, yeah, replacements in all sorts of ways. And the idea that I'm going to make a strict or video purely on this topic, but I don't buy the whole Elon Musk's argument that population collapse is like a more dangerous thing or the biggest threat that we face. It's a very Keynesian way of looking at it, which I totally disagree with, because the argument is that you have to have exponential growth of the population or you're going to have these problems. That it's like impossible to have a population that just kind of exists, you know, a little bit up, a little bit down in some sort of stasis, even though that's the way the world naturally works for every population of any kind of creature ever that doesn't experience some sort of catastrophic issue, you know, like a meteorite or some weird disease or something, is that you reach some sort of equilibrium with your environment. And I think that that's the only way that humans should end up as well, because you obviously can't have exponential growth because you're just pushing the problems into the future. And to say, and if you notice, the argument that they'll say as to why we have to have exponential growth is because they point to the problems created already from increasing growth rate. So we'll say things like, yeah, but if the population declines, then you have a larger group of retirement people than you do the people making the job. So then we have to just keep going up and up and up and up and up so that the next generation is always bigger than the last to make this work. And I'm like, this is a Ponzi scheme. This isn't a real situation. So the actual solution would be identify what's causing this problem, which is unchecked exponential growth, combined with a system that reallocates resources from some people to other people, like I said, based on the need. So they're saying, well, we'll always have more need, so we just have to create constant growth and then we should be fine. That's ridiculous. This America and every other country that they say that this is a problem in, like Japan, South Korea, whatever, and like, oh no, we're dropping down in birth rate. Our country existed with 100 million people without issues. It can exist again at 100 million people without issues. Yes, we've allowed these massive imbalances to occur in terms of, things like retirement plans, but those are already completely bogus, broken systems that never should have existed like that in the first place. So the solution is never to just put the pedal to the metal in population growth and try to outrun that. That's insane, and it's exactly what they're doing with the dollar. Like I said, it's a Keynesian way of looking at the problem. And immigration is not the fix either, because like I said, then you're just transforming the country. I don't believe in magic dirt that, if you took two different populations of people and swapped them, that America would have ended up exactly the same as it is now, regardless of what initial group of people you started with. That's just nonsense. That there's absolutely no genetic component to, culture, behavior at all. That's provably wrong in my mind. People just don't want to deal with that. And you don't even have to try to, like, say that that's a good or a bad thing. Like I said, like some people would not like living in a Japanese type culture. It's very quiet, very demure. There was one Twitter thread I saw one time where I believe he was from India, was talking about how oppressively quiet, or how oppressive the peace and quiet of like an American suburban neighborhood is. And they like the bustle and the chaos and community and everything that they would get in some, you know, currently what we would call third world type environment. And a lot of people here don't want that, so it's all about personal utility too. But if you have, if you were to say, take Japan, for instance, and just cut off, say they could have zero immigration, which they're already pretty low, but they are apparently trying to increase that, and then say, deal with your population collapse, they're going to have problems because of it. But it's not something that can't be overcome. And it's something that once you overcome it, you can actually get to a sustainable, stable system and not just try to rocket blast your way out of it with continued exponential growth. Not just continued growth, continued exponential growth. Like imagine you have to try and save something like Social Security by just making every generation big enough that you could take from them to pay the current payments for some slightly smaller generation. That's absolutely nonsense. It just boggles my mind that someone as smart as Elon Musk actually thinks like that. Veritas File says you can't grow exponentially unless you find a way to expand your ultimate resource base by mining asteroids. Right. I mean, and so, but still, exponentially, you're eventually going to run into problems because of that. And you can say, well, there's practically speaking infinite space, but that's still a lot messier of a way to do it, that has a lot more fraught with problems than to just say, let's just fix these systems so they don't require infinite exponential growth. That's not that hard to do, to create, like, let's say, a retirement program that's based on how much you pay into it. You know what I mean? That there's all sorts of ways that these problems could be fixed by not just being like helicopter money population version. You know what I mean? So let's get into the things that you are going to need. We're only about 20 minutes in, because I titled this the 4 things you're going to need. We're past a point of no return economically. We're absolutely going to see massive economic problems in the future, specifically with the dollar becoming weaker, things getting more expensive, getting harder to get. We're past the point of no return, I believe, with foreign conflicts and World War III. I definitely think in 50 years from now, World War III start date will be sometime in our current past. Probably they'll talk about the special military operation that Russia started as being the main start, maybe even earlier. With why they did that in the first place, but certainly with that, or October 7th, or whatever. And if it's not, then it'll be whenever China does their next move. But we are on an unavoidable path to expansion of World War III, and I now think that we are pretty much inevitably going to see some kind of nuclear detonation of some kind within the next 5 years. Hopefully, it will just be a tactical display kind of thing, and not a um, strategic level nuke or EMP or something like that, but it certainly could be. And then we're also, like I said, past point of no return in terms of civil conflict is going to erupt because of the various types of dozen plus different nations that now inhabit every Western country and have totally different views and ideologies and don't primarily think of themselves as Americans or as British or as Germans or whatever. They primarily think of themselves as some other identity group. And yeah, so the things that we're going to need because of that, I think the big one is, I mean, I'm not, this is past all your basic level preps. So I'm focusing on things that I think are going to be beyond the basic food and water and basic security level preps is things that are going to be harder to get for either logistical reasons or even legal reasons. So because, like I said, I think that a nuclear detonation, some car alarm is going off liquid. Let me make sure it's not mine. Yeah, sorry, we're good to go. So because I think that there will be some kind of nuclear detonation, and I don't think it will be in the US, at least I certainly hope not. But regardless, when that happens, the chance of additional ones happening are going to be through the roof, and anything that you need to deal with that is just going to instantly disappear. That might even happen with the first test. So the first thing on the list is NBC protection of some kind. So you guys know I like Mira masks. Link will be in the description. Great CBRN protection. Um, they have a new one out that is kind of a merging between the full face and the eye hole ones that allows you to use a weapon. So it's like it's a hybrid that you get a much better field of view and it still has better clearance for for using a weapon at the same time. That is my opinion is best one so far. I don't have that one yet. I'm hopefully gonna get them to send me one because right now I have the full face one and their CBR. It's a full CBRN mask, so not just for dust or smoke, or you can get all different kinds of filters for virus and stuff like that too. So some kind of CBRN mask, some kind of ThyroSafe or any of the ones that pills you can take for that, and basic shelter plan and stuff for some kind of NBC protection because those masks like that take like 6 weeks to get now. Yeah, potassium iodide. Um, if you were to order a Mira mask now, it might take 4 weeks, I think, something like that, when they're not sold out. If you see a nuke go off anywhere, even if it's just a tactical one in the middle of an empty field, you might not get one in 6 months, and they're going to be twice as expensive. So just get that shit now. It's really not that much money, a couple $100, and you definitely need to do it. Like I said, I'll put that link in the description. Same thing goes with talking about legal protections, or not legal protections, but protective gear that might be limited because of legal reasons is bulletproof vests or plates. We've seen specifically a push for the governments to try and outlaw some of that stuff. I think specifically the level 4 plates. So if you have any way to get that now, if you can, get it now. And soft body armor is usually rated at a 5-year service life. That's not the same as a 5-year shelf life per se. So while none of these companies will guarantee that the ballistic protection past 5 years, that 5 years that they do rate it for is assuming 5 years of like daily wear of a police officer who's like using that, throwing it in his car, taking it on and off, sweating in it, that sort of thing. So if it's hanging in your closet most of the time, maybe you wear it while you're training once a month, once a quarter, or whatever. Theoretically, you should be able to assume that you'll have some ballistic protection well past that 5-year mark, but they're just not going to guarantee it. But plates, on the other hand, especially the metal plates, you should be able to last indefinitely if they haven't been dropped or shot already. Now, the ceramic plates are much cheaper, but they also are not quite as good with multiple strikes over a long period of time. And the metal plates are much heavier, but you just have to worry about spalling. Now, some of them do have an anti-spall coating. I've been trying to think of it because I'm thinking like deep into an apocalypse. It's kind of nonsense to think that you would have a plate that you needs to be able to take 20 strikes, like you get shot 20 times in your plate without having to, or without getting messed up somewhere else. But I've been wanting to do an experiment about taking a steel plate and just welding some kind of like lip around it, like a raised bead, like to see if that would stop the spalling or get it to like spray out instead of up into your neck or limbs. It would add some weight and some thickness to it, but it would be something that you could have almost indefinite number of strikes as long as they're within the rated, rounds. Yeah, so far we got NBC gear, body armor plates, protective gear like that could theoretically be outlawed. And that goes for offensive stuff that might be outlawed too. Like who knows what they're gonna do with and that's my third one is self-defense setup. Like obviously you should have a basic firearm preparation or firearm and ammo, things like that for self-protection for a wide variety of scenarios, any type of shit fan, any type of minor event. But like I said, as we're going to go down into the third thing on my list, Mark, is down into civil unrest, all sorts of. I think, like I've said in my last one, I think our future is not Mad Max. I think it's South Africa, and that's what we should look at least for the next 10, 20 years or something like that. Lots of civil unrest in a relatively well-armed country, limited government involvement in protecting you from that, if any, but still rule of law officially. So things like I said, the protective gear, but more so along the lines of just systems that you can use to do like maybe even patrols in your neighborhood or something if you have to. So obviously if you can afford things like night vision or thermal or suppressors, but even just gear and different types of setups that you can wear comfortably, get good, not just for concealed carry, but more of like an actual setup for if things got a little worse, but not necessarily wartime. There's a guy on Twitter who actually is in South Africa, he's South African, and that's basically what he does. He does like unit patrol, and it's crazy. You'd think like this is like a real country. Like you'd think this was like a movie or something, the stuff that they have to deal with. They have, gangs of thieves using like jamming backpacks and stuff to raid people's houses to jam the cell communication so you can't call 911 and have 4 or 5 people come to your house and all sorts of other stuff. So think of things to deal with that. I mean, include security systems like visual security systems. I have video recently where I talked about all the different types of home security you can do. So that's in this list. But self-defense setup would include home security, would include physical gear you can carry, not just for like an everyday inside the waistband EDC, but like a real like, hey, I'm looking on the camera and there's 5 guys rolling up, and one of them has a cell phone jammer, so I can't even call the police, even if I thought they were going to come. And yeah, so that's the type of stuff. Anything you can do to force multiplication and up your defensive capabilities and harden your dwelling, that sort of thing. And then number one, not number one, but I guess the fourth one on this list, these were in no specific order, is we've seen all the increase in the scuttlebutt about the new pandemic, but eventually there's going to be something that you'll need medicine for. And specifically, we get into it with China. They make a lot of our generic antibiotics. So stocking up on meds and first aid supplies is going to be huge. I use Jay's case, put the link in the description after I'm done too. There's contingency medical as well. And I think the Jace, even now, you can get stuff like ivermectin. I think you can get Tamiflu, and they have different ads on. So lots of stuff that you can get that would be, without hyperbole, a lifesaver if you get to where you need it, and could be extremely expensive to get, could be extremely susceptible to different types of supply chain issues, and could theoretically get clamped down on by the government if they start, for whatever reason. We're clamping down on random supplements like NAC, and you weren't even going to talk about vitamin D and stuff during the COVID nonsense. It's absolutely ridiculous. So there's no reason to think that that couldn't happen again. Get that stuff now. A lot of antibiotics in those medicines actually have a really decent shelf life if stored in indoor type temperatures and not in the garage or storage unit or something, but actually in your house. You can expect that stuff to have most of its efficacy for a couple decades, at least with standard antibiotics. So yeah, so that's my list. Those are the 4 things that I think that beyond basic preps, like I said, we've already seen people talk about. I think it was Martin Armstrong on Greg Hunter's show, who's saying that you should have 2 years of food. I think I'm close. I think I'm there for only 2 people. If I don't have anyone else that I need to help out, I think we could last 2 years, in just terms of just calories alone. But It's a bit extreme. You know what I mean? And that includes 2 years of cooking, 2 years. So I don't think you're going to need 2 years specifically, but if you go for without being supplied for 2 years, that's pretty good. I think a lot, like I said, look at the South African model and what we're going to have to deal with. I think that's our future. And then combine it with the fact that because our currency is getting destroyed, that everything's going to be really expensive and hard to get. Appreciate it, Lucius Cincinnatus. What are the four things again? All right, so I'll run through them briefly. And these are all things because that I think will be either very hard to get because of logistical supply chain reasons, very expensive to get because of economic collapse and supply chain reasons, or could theoretically be controlled and like limited by government. So the first one was NBC protection. So CBRN mask, the mirror mask, the potassium iodide, special filter if you think you need it, and just a plan or shelter from that. So NBC protection is the first one because as soon as any bomb goes off, then it's just going to be gone. There's not that much of it out there in terms of if you have even a small percentage of normies decide they need a mask, they're gone and they're going to be $1,200 a piece if you can even find it. And so NBC protection is the first one. Bulletproof gear, whether that's the shields, a vest, but specifically the level 4 plates. I've seen governments trying to start bills and stuff to make that illegal because they don't like the idea that cops can't kill you whenever they feel like it. And so level 4 plates are like, oh, get them all like soiling their panties. So level 4 plates specifically the plates last longer than the soft body armor, but soft body armor is great too. And so then the third one is self-defense and security in general for what I view as being like our potential future with the South Africa. So security, physical defense, like bolstering your house. Talked about all sorts of ways you can do that, and stuff that is force multiplier if you have to deal with a group of 5 guys trying to bust into your house at once and they have cell phone jammers and stuff like that. So if obviously if you can afford stuff like night vision or thermal, but even just a better setup so you're not just rolling into literal battle in that case with an inside the waistband for your subcompact pistol, but like a real setup for if you think this is going to be a possibility. And like I said, any sort of force multipliers that you can have, like pepper spray, foggers, suppressors, if that helps, helmets, NVG, any of that stuff that you can get would not be a bad idea if you can afford it. And then the fourth one would be the medical, because that's just going to be continuing. It's more expensive. It'll likely be controlled again, like we saw in COVID, where they're even trying to limit lots of supplements, basic supplements. So the J's case and the contingency medical, which you can now get Tamiflu and even ivermectin and things like that. And no, a good point, Gregory. I appreciate you mentioning it. The fifth one is, of course, Rule of the Wasteland Survival Fishing Kit, which would come in the deluxe, if you can take the extra weight, or just the micro, if you're not thinking you might need to fish, which, unlike all the other items on the list, these are the only ones that offer you a full money-back guarantee if you do not survive the apocalypse. So if you have bought either Rule of the Wasteland fishing kits and you die during an apocalypse, I will give you your money back because you will absolutely survive if you have this. What do the nails say? Well, I can't read that one. The nails say. Yeah, stim packs. We need stim packs. Yeah, because we're seeing a lot of talking about night vision, scan 360. I mean, it's worse than that because we're seeing a lot more in South Africa type situations, and it's already happening here in the U.S. where people are like following people home and just trying to ambush them as they get at. So it's kind of unrealistic for people to like in the movies where they're like, we've been followed for a long time. But it's very simple actually to every time you're driving around, when you get for the last few turns to get to your house, just pay attention to who's behind you because it's very unlikely that someone will follow you. It's easy to tell if they're following you for the last few turns. And it's really not a huge risk to have someone know generally what neighborhood you live in, especially if it's a very opportunistic thing like that, where they just saw you at the grocery store and then maybe they saw you with a bunch of food. Now they think they're just going to rob you. So if you've noticed the same car take the few turns, like 2-3 turns in a row, make 1 or 2 turns differently. Don't go right to your house and watch them again. If they still keep following you, then you can do stuff to really make sure, like run a light maybe, or stop with your blinker on, start to turn, and then go the other way. And if they follow you with one of these crazy maneuvers, then they're really trying to follow you, and you can make a decision then. But at the very least, just drive past your house but you only have to do that at the last few turns. So like if you say, okay, I've got 3 or 4 more turns left to get to my house, let me see the 3 or 4 cars behind me every time I turn. And if one of them makes it through several turns, then I know that there's a chance that they're falling. But it's still unlikely, and it takes a lot of mental capital to do it every time. So it's really unrealistic to think that people are going to constantly be able to tell if a car is following them, especially if they're very good or even moderately good at tailing. It's going to be hard to tell, and it's much easier to do it where the closer you get to your house, because there's usually fewer and fewer cars behind you in general as you get into a neighborhood or something. And it's very difficult to do this at night because all you see are headlights and there's no way to tell if it's the same car, which makes it even more important to get it down to where there's only 1 or 2 cars behind you and you can kind of keep an eye on it. But yeah, something to keep in mind. Little known tech is something called software defined radio. You can get a card to put into computer, allows you to read any radio signal. Yeah, there's all sorts of weird tech stuff. I am not a tech guy, and that stuff I actually hate. All the how scary all this stuff is with the new drone technology and all the flipper zeros and all the other ways that people can just block your and get on your Wi-Fi and create false networks and block your networks, and just the way absolutely everything is being tracked by the NSA and CIA. Just a mess. I hate it. Mill Hatton says, get a second passport and citizenship or resident permit. That's awesome if you can get it. For a lot of people, it takes um, a lot of money that we don't have. But he says, Bryson means won't save you from what's coming. I think that it's also important to note that what's coming is not the end of the world. Like I said, all of these countries that have gone through this stuff, even Ukraine right now, literally under attack by one of the largest armies in the history of humanity. Life goes on for most people in these places. So you have to plan for that too. And even in South Africa, life goes on. I don't actually foresee that we're going to be, if I actually thought that we were going to have a total, complete collapse, I would be working on trying to probably leave the country and find a remote place with other, as few people as possible, but as like-minded people as possible. But I do think that food production and kind of in a general sense, self-sufficiency, but I don't think the U.S. is going to descend into complete anarchy, hopefully. From which talking about, yeah, spider holes. So how about hair care products? I mean, very important. My head shape is not good for buzzed. I think if I really get in the apocalypse, I would just have to do the shave in the side and then just let this go. Just do like more like a mohawk. So it wouldn't matter as much if I had so much product, but like I don't actually need much. It'll stay like this for a few days if I don't jump in the shower. Don't forget the psychos. Yeah, I mean that's the problem is a lot of these people are actually insane or on drugs and Sonny Crockett says there's a story about a guy who saw World War II coming, so he moved to a remote island in the Pacific named Guadalcanal. Yeah, you gotta have a little bit of luck, I think, sometimes. Yeah, but that's part of it too. Is if we're talking about a real worldwide war conflagration type situation, there might not be any great spots to be, and you can't predict all this stuff ahead of time. So as always, prepping and preparation is about what you need, not necessarily about what specifically is going to happen. So, we need food, we need medicine, we need protection, we need shelter, we need energy, regardless of why these things are being disrupted. So focus on what you need and how and resilient systems for these more so than the exact reason as to why they'll be disrupted. And that will help serve you better. Just flexibility, because no plan survives first contact with the enemy. No plan, period. So and Lucius Cincinnati says the Spaulding test that I was talking about in video, maybe with I don't know how to weld, so I would need someone to help me with that one because I don't know. For everyone who didn't see, I was talking about obviously the steel plates. If you're talking about deep into a apocalypse, you want bulletproof plates that are the most resilient. They, dropping them doesn't normally matter. They can take the most multiple strikes, that sort of thing. It's the steel plates. But even if they have the spall coating, if they already had multiple strikes, then that could be disrupted. I was curious as to if you could build one with a raised lip on it, maybe even like a ramp, just run a bead of welding, kind of ramp it up that I could force a spalling away, shoot it off in a different direction. Maybe it would be an interesting kind of experiment, but not one that I can personally perform because I don't know how to weld. It's my one of my great weaknesses as a man. Speaking of my man weaknesses, I don't know if I should tell you guys this because the internet is forever. But I bought the storage trailer for my one of my many side hustles. My whole income is made up of various side hustles, and one of them is flipping storage units, buying stuff at garage sales, selling on eBay and Amazon, just reselling in general. So I got this cargo trailer to facilitate that, and it's just a stumpy little guy, a 5x8 V-nose trailer, pretty cool. But man, backing that, I have driven with some trailers before, way back in the day, but not in the last 20 years. And trying to back that thing in for the first time, and any amount of like man cred I built up over the years by doing fighting and jujitsu and having all the right tools and being in the army and driving a motorcycle. If anyone saw me trying to back that thing in for the first time, I just lost it all. Terrible. And I was posting on Facebook that good thing I'm out here, and because if I was back in Alachua County, Florida, back in Gainesville, some redneck girl would have pulled up and offered to help me back it in, and that just would have been a fatality. So I'm a little better now practicing, with my little trailer, because the short one actually I think makes it harder because it's such a short. It's not a narrow wheelbase, but the actual trailer itself is only 8 feet long, so like it's easy to. You got to do micro adjustments. So the first time I'm sitting there like in the middle of the road, it's pouring sweat, trying to 50 times backing up, It's a mess. What a mess. Supposed to have Kevlar in front of the steel plates to catch the frags. I've never heard of that. I mean, if you don't have the spall anti-spall coating is the best. Those work pretty well. If you don't have that, I think something like taping Kevlar to it or something could help. But a shield, they actually have shields you can get. I have one, which is pretty bad. So it might be a better way to go. Is just there's a lot of ways that the shield limits you logistically because it is heavy and large. But if it covers a wider area, you don't have to worry about spalling, that sort of thing. So if you're going to go steel, maybe get the shield instead of the plates. Lucius says, no one can explain why the trailer goes left when you turn the wheel right and more left when you turn the wheel left. It's a disaster. And that's my biggest key, my mental cue is micro adjustments. Because if you're like backing this thing up and you start to go like that, and then you start to turn the trailer or the car to try to make the thing go like this, it has to go like that first and before you come around. So the key for all you people who haven't done this is as soon as you start to see it move at all, then you start to correct and just do little adjustments. Because if you get it at more than like a 15-degree angle, like he was saying, like turning it the wheel the opposite direction doesn't even matter. You have to have a huge kind of swath. So micro adjustments, and don't use the mirrors. That makes like a double level of abstraction to look at the back and just as soon as you see it turn, correct the other way. Correct. Not a lot of loot to an 8-foot trailer. Yep. But yeah, it can be frustrating, and I was terrible at it the first time. We're getting a little better. Disaster. Is the Pawn Stars store legit in Vegas? Was watching some of their videos lately. I've never actually been there. I think originally they were and still are legit as a store, but I mean, like obviously reality TV is enhanced for entertainment values, and now it's more of a brand. But yeah, it's not like fake place. It was a real, and that's why they got the show. Nobody's going anywhere on the roads post SHTF. There will be ambushes everywhere. You can't risk it. Like I said, I don't believe in a shit hit the fan. I use that term a lot because people know what it means, but I don't think there will be a shit hit the fan where there's a pre and a post. Like look at Fairfowl and surviving the economic collapse in Argentina. Look at this guy on Twitter I was talking about, and his dealings in South Africa. That's what we're gonna have to deal with. Where in some neighborhoods and sometimes you'll roll through the lights because if you stop, people run up and loot you. But it's gonna be on your way to work still because you still have to pay your property taxes and you have to pay your bills. And there could be like he always posts about the area denial. You'll be going to work one day and all of a sudden there's a huge bunch of uh people burning tires in the middle of the road to block the road, maybe looting the cars that go through. But are you just going to never go to and then not have any money? It's not going to be, you're still going to have to pay your property taxes, pay your taxes, pay your electric bill. So it's honestly like the worst of both worlds because you are still going to have to go places, even though there are ambushes. So that's why I always focus on that because, like I said, it's honestly more realistic than a major grid down Walking Dead, Mad Max type situation. And it's also worse. It's harder to deal with in my mind because people aren't just going to be able to just opt out, you know? Right. And like Matthew Stone says, full anarchy apocalypse collapse doesn't last long anyway, because then you do get Mad Max, where all of a sudden you have a few roving gangs, and then you settle into more of like just a kind of warlord type situation where it's still not pure anarchy. You have a couple factions, you know, you got Bullet Farm and Gastown and the Citadel that occasionally fight it out, but still have their own little, you know, rule of laws within their system, just fighting for resources. But I don't think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see South Africa. I think we're going to see what we've always seen in every country that's gone through this in the past couple hundred years. I don't see any reason to think that this will be different. I think it's farther to fall for the US, unfortunately. Pay for their thugs with what? With resources. That's what all economics is actually based on, is allocation of zero scarce resources. $100 bills are abstractions, but they are representations of wealth. When it comes down to it, first order wealth, like Chris Martin always said, is the things that we actually need: food, materials to build things, metals, wood, human capital and labor, things like that. That's all any financial instrument at its core is a representation of those things. Stacking up units on a computer screen or paper stack is always meaningless until you transfer it, you know, except for how it represents your ability to get actual physical things. Yeah, we're going to crash. It's just a question of how soon and how bad. Yeah, and what a crash looks like. Like I said, South Africa's a crash. Yugoslavia had a crash. Zimbabwe had a crash. Every one of these countries and fiat currencies has had a crash. Right. A cattleman could pay a soldier in beef, farmer, you know, then paid security. It's like human nature and human society and culture, none of that's changed in the past 10,000 years. So this is going to go the same way it's always gone. It'll just be, like I said, we have farther to fall, and there's different technological things that we have that they didn't back then. People need food, they need water, they need physical resources to build things. And then once you get some level of stability, you start moving up the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, just like it's always been. Where I'm at, Matt says I would be trading things that the Amish need that either have or could get maintained. Right? Yeah, remember back then the British paid them with daily rum ration. People risk their lives for salt and spices. You know, stuff. The money is always just represented stuff. All right, I've got 6:47. So let's. Do you have any current events type stuff in the news that I should hit up or questions? Let me know. I can go for a few more minutes. Appreciate you guys swinging in, watching. Livestock will be gone in a couple months due to 100 million starving. Like I said, you talk about, you have a vision in your head of exactly how this is going to go, and that's a possibility, but it's one possibility. There's still livestock in South Africa. There's still livestock and people living somehow in even sub-Saharan Africa and Congo and everything, where things are way worse. I'm going to become a warlord this spring at the center of my compound or radioactive free water. Yeah, and we shall ride eternal, shiny and chrome. Good times. Good times. How many of you, let me put get the test. How many of you guys have a CBRN mask? Put a one in the chat if you have a CBRN mask. And put a two if you have some other kind of like mask that is good for or could work for a nuclear fallout but isn't full CBRN. So one for CBRN, two for like a respirator, but that isn't full CBRN. Where will they get the booze? What's gone here will be gone in a month. So the grain fruit needed to make more. I mean, people naturally tend towards stability. People want stability. People zero. You need to work on that. Yeah, put a zero if you don't have either. So booze, they make booze in prison, man. Like this stuff is Life goes on. That's what I've always tried to. It's a shittier life. All right, so we got some two. So a lot of respirators, but a couple zeros, zeros, zeros. Yeah, zeros no good. Both one and two. That's awesome because a lot of times you can get away with cheaper filters for the respirators that you don't have to do. Why would anyone barter with you when you can just snipe you and have everything you have? Because then you only can do that once. You can skin a sheep only once. And maybe they don't want to raise chickens, or maybe, you know what I mean? Like people have always settled the natural, there are always predators out there, but that's not the natural straight state of the majority of humans. Is people want some level of security and stability and to just be able to live a life and don't want to just be constantly predating because it's harder that way too. Like I said, you can only do that once. And then are you going to become a farmer now, or are you just going to take it all, eat it all once, and then have to go look somewhere else? Some people will do that. Some people do that now. And yeah, and like Veritas File says, if it gets to that level of, back in the day, you will probably have places with security, like Bartertown type places. But I'm not anticipating a total, like, without rule of law situation. I think there's a rule by law. Like I said, look at South Africa. Look at you have to, at this point, someone would have to tell me why this would be different than any of the other times this happened in your history. It certainly could be, but I think the onus is on whoever thinks that it will be to show why it would. Yeah, so Sonny says if it ain't the end of the world, all you need is a canteen of water, a bicycle, a bit of gold and cash, and move out of the affected area. So what is the affected area? Let's say like if you're in South Africa right now, it's not the end of the world. Where are you going with your canteen of water, your bicycle, and your gold and cash? You're just going to live on someone's land illegally, government land, until they kick you off. Then what? Like I said, this is harder when it's not complete with rule of law. Because if it's without rule of law, you can just drive out somewhere and try to live off the land, maybe. Right. The gray and black markets become more prevalent because, like I said, most people do not want a state of complete chaos and anarchy. They react to it, and bandits, the sociopaths will take advantage of it. But most people are going to be fighting for some level of order, some level of security, some level of community, some level of governance or rules of some kind. So most people will be fighting for that. Right. Yeah, there's emergent orders that happen based on the local culture and just how severe the resource scarcity is and stuff like that. But most people fight for the order. They just are selfishly, operating within the system, but they don't want a system where you're fighting for your life every single day. No one really wants that. Yeah, and it's like Vance is saying, if you're always robbing people, eventually you have to keep moving, and eventually you're going to get got. It's a dangerous way to go. There's going to be areas where they have to develop their own, enforcement. Yeah, I think, like I said, I have not been shy about saying that I think Bitcoin is going to definitely benefit from people fleeing the dollar in situations where we still have grid up, still have electricity, stuff like that. Um, the it's there's going to be a blow off valve, and I'm going to make a video on this too, where I about how like the Rafi Farber and is it George Gammon talking about gold specifically and Gammon's time in Argentina. I think they're both a little bit off how I think it's going to go. But the bottom line is we're never going to have a situation where you have a functioning economy of any kind and people are paying directly with gold and silver. It just can't work. There's not enough of it. There's no way to transfer it effectively from like the local wall to like verify it there to divide it up into the right amount. You're always going to have something that represents some kind of currency based on it, maybe that you're using, but you're never going to directly use gold and silver in it in what anything close to what we would consider a functioning economy. Um, so yeah, so Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, if people do flee the dollar, people will still buy gold and silver a lot for sure. It's a great place to be. I think it's the best place to be, but it's not the only place to be. I think that Bitcoin and crypto in general, but specifically Bitcoin and to a lesser extent Ethereum will benefit as a blow off valve. for that because it's easier to get um, for most people. And even for most millennials and younger, it's going to be easier to know that you're getting the right thing. They have some experience. I bet I would venture to say, I would bet a lot to say that there's way more people my age or younger who have had some experience buying or selling crypto than buying or selling gold and silver. Sure. Yeah, Sonny, he's saying just like they won't buy gold, Crowder tried to give away 1 ounce gold coin at the coin store and nobody would take it. I mean, that's a different dynamic. That does exist because once or if slash when we get to a situation where people really do not want US dollars anymore, that will change for sure. People recognizing gold and silver, things like that. But we're still never going to get to a point where I can walk into a Walmart with this bar of silver and say, yeah, I'm going to get these eggs, this meat, and make sure you give me 2 ounces back. Like, are they even going to be able to do that? Are they going to be able to verify this somehow for every minute transaction there? And then when they collect at the end of the day, where is it going? And if they do send it off, how does it get back to me to be able to buy more things? So, if they do it'll become extremely valuable, just like it has every time fiat currency, just like every type of first order wealth will be recognized at least as what's actually valuable. But there's still going to have to be some minor level of abstraction to represent it. It's not going to be used directly. This doesn't make sense. It's too logistically unfeasible in anything approaching a modern economy. Within a village of a few hundred people, like yeah, you could exclusively use gold and silver as trade and occasionally trading between another couple villages. But in a country like the US or any relatively modern country, large country that has any sort of functional banking and finance system at all, that there's just going to have to be some sort of currency that is representing that physical wealth. Right. Yeah, and I agree with that too. Like the Veritas file says, gold and silver are also not so significant use until viable alternatives like the dollar simply aren't useful. Right. So that's what I've been saying for a long time, and that's why I think we should take advantage of this price stuff, the way this price now, because it's like an all or nothing thing. You know what I mean? It's just going to continue to kind of go sideways, slowly up, while people are still using the dollar. And this is what I've talked about with. I remember back in the day with JJ and a few other people talking about how like the bricks, whatever they come up with for the new currency, and people saying like, well, they can't, the dollar's better. I'm like, it is better. But that's like saying a bridge that's crossing a gorge is going to be a lot better than the goat trail that's twice as long you have to walk, unless the bridge collapses. You know what I mean? Like no one's going to use the bridge when it's breaking apart under their feet. That doesn't, like, of course the bridge is better. I'm talking about when it's no longer better, when it really people start to see that it is poorly designed and crumbling, then people are going to have to take the goat trail. Everyone's going to be on the goat trail. So he says, wouldn't bother with silver much. There's no shortage of it since we no longer burn tons of it per year for photography. We use a lot more of it for electronics and photovoltaics and missiles than we ever used for photography. There's like kilograms of it in every single electric car, multiple pounds of it in like a single missile and things like that. Look up how much is needed for every type of electronic device. Nothing to do with photography is like nothing compared to what they need for all the electronics you're using. And that's with almost zero demand for it as a monetary method. True value of silver and gold is not it's for use, trade, and whatever the currency after the day. For me, it's like it's not before or after. It's the fact that this is just not a dollar. It could be gold and silver, it could be copper, it could be land, it could be oil, it could be food, it could be anything, any real thing. The reason I like gold and silver specifically compared to all those things is because you can buy it in smaller quantities and you can store it, which you can't really do with land. You can't buy it in small quantities. You can't transfer it. Things like food and oil, you could buy in small quantities, but you can't store it. Transactionally, it's hard. Like, what are you going to sell like a barrel of crude to somebody? So you can invest in those things for sure. And I would recommend it if you have that, spare capital and stuff. But for the average person who just wants to keep the stuff with them, have physical control over it, buy it in small amounts, be able to move it, shelf stable. Not many things hit all those requirements like gold and silver did. And that's why I like it. Not because it's the only thing that is going to be worthwhile. It's just anything I think will be worthwhile. You just want to make sure that it hits those bullet points. Right. And gold and silver will retain their value if there's no collapse. Yeah, probably better. I just think that the US dollar is going to weaken in its real purchasing power. And like I said, so all that stuff is going to go up. Anything we would buy, our clothing will go up in value, our houses will go up in value, our food will go up in value, which also means cost. Um, Vehicles, things like that. Like the stuff that we are don't need will might lose in real value. It'll still go up in nominal value. But all the things we need. If you had a way to, invest in lumber, that would be fine too. Any of these actual things that people are still going to need. Ammunition, fantastic. It stores pretty well, especially if you get like the sealed tins and things like that. It can certainly be viable for decades. I certainly don't think it's going to be any cheaper anytime soon. Pretty easy to sell, pretty easy to transport. Still not as dense in value. If you're really talking about like, I need to hit the road and take some wealth with me. If you had a bar of gold, even a few ounces of gold, it's going to take a lot of ammo. But you want to have both anyway. You want to make sure you have it. I'd never buy bars, only coins for that very reason. For which reason? You can test silver than acid. No need to drill in bars. Yeah, there's all sorts of ways you can test it. Um, I buy everything. I buy a little bit of everything. Full collapse, precious metals unlikely to be worth much, and few will have anything to bar. Yeah, again, why are you stuck on full collapse? This idea of full collapse that has never fucking happened before ever. It could happen. So if you want to take precautions, but like I'm trying to look ahead at what's most likely and what will work across the majority, the largest majority of scenarios. And there's not too many scenarios where gold and silver is worthless. There's some, but there's not too many. Portable lumber mills on my to buy. That would be nice, but you also have to have the trees. Yeah, it's true that any type of collapse months during the descent and just holding on to something that, like I said, if you have a gold bar or even a silver bar, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, it's going to be worth something. Pass it down, store. You don't have to worry about it, aging out or spoiling or anything like that. Yeah, enforce it definitely helps as a savings method. Trees if you have them, land if you have them. You can't take it with you, honestly, but there's no choice you can make that is free from potential downsides. So that's why diversification is always going to be best. But for most of the bullet points that could be a problem, gold and silver and precious metals are the best. They hit the most bullet points. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you watching. Been the full hour. I have a few videos already planned that are not going to be live streamed because I've been pretty bad about getting anything else up, but they're in the works. I appreciate you guys watching. And go ahead and before you leave, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like button. And always remember, if you don't have one, World Wasteland Survival Fishing Kits. Only survival fishing kit with a full money back guarantee if you don't survive the apocalypse. But I will talk to you guys later. Thanks for watching.